What's really going on behind the scenes right now with Donald Trump and Iran is far more serious than anything you're hearing in the mainstream media. Over the past 24 hours, Trump has gone completely silent, and there's a very specific reason why. He's preparing what can only be described as a full surrender to Iran, but he's trying to make it look like a victory. Let me break down exactly what's happening and why the stakes have never been higher for the United States economy. First, let's talk about Trump's disappearing act. Earlier this week, Trump had that very suspicious meeting at Walter Reed Medical Center where he claimed it was just for an annual checkup. But then, on the critical day when negotiations were reaching their peak, Trump simply vanished from public view. Meanwhile, his vice president, JD Vance, has been sent out to do all the talking, giving press conferences from the tarmac, trying to spin this narrative that everything is going great and they're very close to a deal. But Trump himself, nowhere to be found. This is a classic move when you're in a weak negotiating position and you don't want to be personally associated with the concessions you're about to make. Now, here's what's really driving all of this desperation. The United States is facing an existential oil crisis that almost nobody is talking about. This is the real reason why Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was at the White House yesterday having what can only be described as a disastrous press conference. We are running dangerously low on oil reserves. In fact, we're only about 9 million barrels away from hitting a storage level that's equivalent to living paycheck to paycheck for gasoline and distillate. Once we hit that critical threshold, even a minor disruption at any oil facility will result in gasoline lines at gas stations across America. Let me give you the numbers that should terrify you. According to HFI research, U.S. oil stockpiles have fallen for a fifth straight week. Global inventories are approaching what executives are calling unheard of inventory levels. An ExxonMobil executive just warned that a price spike is now only weeks away. Think about that. We're talking about Brent crude potentially spiking to $150, $160, even $200 per barrel very quickly. At current prices, Brent futures are holding at around $94, but that's only because the market is hoping for a deal with Iran. If that deal falls through, or if there's any disruption to the Strait of Hormuz, you're going to see prices explode. Here's the critical part that most people don't understand. Global oil inventories don't need to hit zero to cause massive economic collapse. According to JP Morgan and Rapid Energy analysts, if the system dips below 7 billion barrels, circulation seizes up and the entire energy system fails. Markets will push up prices dramatically to try to avert systemic failure before that happens. Trump's war against Iran brought us from about 8 billion barrels in February down to 7.6 billion barrels today. If the Strait of Hormuz stays closed into September, JP Morgan projects we'll be at 6.8 billion barrels, which is below those critical levels. At that point, oil prices will spike before September to destroy demand and keep inventories intact. That's basic economics. And that's the scenario that's keeping Treasury Secretary Bessent and the entire Trump administration up at night. So what does Iran know right now? They know that every single day that passes, the United States gets closer to that critical threshold. They know that Trump is absolutely terrified of a full-scale war with Iran because that would destroy not just the American economy, but the global economy, and they're using that leverage perfectly. Every time there's an increase in hostilities, every time the U.S. strikes an area near the Hormuz Strait, what does Trump say? We're not at war. We're not at war. The ceasefire is still holding. The ceasefire is still holding. Iran watches this and thinks, got it. You're terrified of war. That's your sensitive spot. Let's press on that. Just look at what happened this week. A source very close to Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, Iran's parliament leader and lead negotiator, posted a message that directly contradicts everything the Trump administration is saying. According to this source, what Trump has been leaking to Axios is not the text of the final agreement. Disagreements continue. The United States requested agreement multiple times a day through various channels, but Iran has rejected these requests and emphasizes continuing exchanges of messages until Iran's goals are fully achieved. Iran's conditions in the potential agreement have not yet been met, and there is a possibility of one-sided spin by Trump regarding the text. Meanwhile, JD Vance is out there saying everything is great, we're negotiating in good faith, we're very close to a deal. But Iran's parliament members are sending very different messages. Ibrahim Razi from Iran's parliament posted, "The fact that Trump insists after every confrontation that he has not entered into a war with Iran and that the ceasefire still exists is a sign of the enemy's weakness and their fear of returning to war. Diplomats must not let go of the enemy's point of weakness and must impose maximum demands on him." That's exactly what Iran is doing. They've read Trump perfectly. Let's talk about what's actually being negotiated behind the scenes, because this is where it gets really interesting. According to the New York Times, Trump and JD Vance are trying to develop a workaround to funnel billions of dollars to Iran without directly paying Iran billions of dollars. Why? Because Iran is demanding $12 billion as part of any deal, and Trump doesn't want to wire that money directly because then he'd have to admit he did a weaker deal than Obama's JCPOA. So what's the plan? They're lobbying Gulf Arab states to help. The idea is, can you help us with a $300 billion investment fund for Iran? Can we structure it so that maybe you pay Iran and it doesn't look like we've paid Iran directly? That way Trump can go to the American people and say he did a stronger deal than Obama. But here's the problem. Iran doesn't trust that arrangement. Iran says there's no deal until we wire you $12 billion directly. And Trump is in a bind because if he wires that money, he's admitting his deal is worse than Obama's. If he doesn't wire it, there's no deal, and the oil crisis continues to worsen. That's the strategic deadlock we're in right now. Now let's talk about what's happening on the military front, because this is also being completely covered up by the mainstream media. According to military reports that aren't being reported by corporate news, U.S. drones and planes are finding that Iran is able to target them at a level far more efficient than when the war even started. Just yesterday in the Bushehr region, Iran was able to strike down another MQ-9 Reaper drone. This follows another MQ-9 Reaper being shot down just a few days back. There's probably close to $1 billion in MQ-9 Reaper drones alone from the United States that have been destroyed by Iran, and the U.S. military is just covering it up. Yet Stephen Miller, Trump's Homeland Security advisor, is out there saying for 4 weeks, we decimated Iran, we destroyed them. But if you've decimated them and destroyed them and they don't have a navy, then why is the Strait of Hormuz closed? Why does Donald Trump keep saying we're not in a war? Why is the Islamic Republic still in power? This doesn't look like decimation and destruction. This looks like a stalemate where Iran is actually gaining strength and leverage. And that's exactly what's happening. When JD Vance is asked why we believe the ceasefire is holding when we keep intercepting missiles striking, his response is pathetic. He says, well, you know, these ceasefires are always a little messy, and sometimes the guys at the lower level aren't communicating with the guys at the top level. Sometimes people make mistakes. But that's not what's going on in Iran. Iran is not confused. Iran is not making mistakes. Iran is deliberately testing American defenses, deliberately keeping the pressure on, and deliberately showing Trump that they have the leverage. Ibrahim Azizi, the National Security Council leader for the parliament, made this crystal clear. Iran's not backing down from its red lines, such as the right to enrichment and enriched uranium management of the Strait of Hormuz and the lifting of sanctions in the face of Trump's rhetoric. Everyone knows now that Trump, in order to save himself from this strategic deadlock, resorts to this tool of threats one day and begs for an agreement the next. That's exactly where we are. So let me summarize what's really happening. Trump is desperate. The oil crisis is real and it's accelerating. Iran knows that every day that passes brings us closer to economic collapse. Trump is trying to negotiate a deal that saves face, but Iran won't accept anything less than their full demands. $12 billion in direct payments, recognition of their right to uranium enrichment, management of the Strait of Hormuz, and lifting of sanctions. Trump doesn't want to give all of that because it looks worse than what Obama did. So Trump is trying to find creative financial workarounds, but Iran doesn't trust those workarounds. Meanwhile, the American people are suffering. Healthcare is unaffordable. Homes are unaffordable. Groceries are unaffordable. Rent is unaffordable. And what is the Trump administration focused on? Paying millions to quickly cover 4 enormous bronze horses with 23.75 carat gold leaf in Washington, D.C. The money for this rush job is coming from the National Park Service. While Americans are struggling, Trump is literally gilding horses in the Capitol. And while all of this is happening, we have a situation developing in Eastern Europe that's also being ignored. Russia just hit a Romanian apartment complex with a drone while attacking Ukrainian infrastructure near the border. Romania is a NATO member. This is a direct attack on NATO territory. But Trump, silence. NATO put out a weak statement without Trump's backing. Other NATO nations responded strongly, but nothing from Trump. This is what happens when he's weak in NATO. This is what happens when America's allies can't count on American leadership. So here's what we're facing. We're days away from a global depression. We're at a critical juncture where the oil shortage is about to force prices to spike to levels that will destroy demand and crash the global economy. Trump is desperately trying to negotiate a deal with Iran, but he's in a weak position because Iran knows he's terrified of the economic consequences of continued conflict. Iran is holding firm on their demands. And Trump is trying to find creative ways to pay Iran without looking like he's paying Iran. The American people deserve to know what's really happening. You deserve facts, not talking heads shouting and yelling. You deserve to understand the economic realities that are driving these negotiations. The mainstream media won't give you this analysis. They won't dig into the weeds. They won't connect the dots between the oil crisis, the military situation, the negotiations, and the desperation of the Trump administration. We will continue to bring you these detailed economic and political analyses every single day. We will continue to expose what's really happening behind the scenes. We will continue to give you the facts you need to understand the world you're living in, because you deserve better than the propaganda and spin coming from corporate media. You deserve the truth. And that's what we're committed to delivering to you here at the Midas Touch. If you appreciate this level of detail and analysis, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep growing together and building a community that demands truth and facts instead of spin and propaganda. Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you. Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together and fighting for the truth.